Welcome to Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. I'm Lori Faulk, and together with my three powerhouse co-hosts and a slew of thought leaders and luminaries, we're bringing you a scintillating talk show style podcast that will disrupt the worlds of wealth and wellness as we know them today. We invite you to go on this journey with us as we offer you a paradigm shift that empowers you to change your approach to these key areas of your life. Join us and discover the truth that the future of wealth and wellness begins with you.
Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. There are three of us today. We are missing our amazing Leslie Thomas, our money confidence coach. She is away on business. So we are carrying on without her today, and we are welcoming June. So June is often filled with celebrations around graduations and weddings and all kinds of achievements. So today we're going to do a little bit of reframing around transitions and kind of reframing what we often think of as celebrations, because not all transitions feel like confetti and champagne. Some transitions are moves, breakdowns, the endings before beginnings, which include things like divorces and deaths. And, acknowledging that it is possible to be both happy and celebrating, and equally as important to, feel deeply inside your own process as well. So I think that today would be a good time to explore a lot of what people are kind of feeling during these times of transition. And ladies, I would like to open it up to you all. I think that we'll be, hitting some really sensitive points, maybe some triggering points for some of our audience.
Well, Jenny, as it happens, the three of us are going through some major transitions right now. And
I know what you're talking about.
I think, we agreed that we were willing to be a little vulnerable and raw today about some of it because, on this podcast, we've promised to be, disruptive and to be hailing new paradigms of women's wealth and wellness, and we're doing that. And the process of getting there is often very personally disruptive. We were talking last month about mental health and stress. I think even those of us that are pretty balanced and have a lot of skills, I'll speak for myself, being very triggered these days. Transitions trigger us in, all ways, wealth and wellness being, major things. I'm personally going through a move and a breakup, and, that's kind of triggered everything. And it's given me a chance on the plus side to really appreciate and utilize all of the tools that I've developed, in this chapter of my life to be able to navigate these things. So I know we all have stuff to contribute, and I'm just going to kick it off with some basic stuff, which, Jenny used the term reframe, and I think that's so valuable, to find a somewhat different perspective on what we're going through. So I think a really important reframe to start with, and this doesn't always feel true to the conscious mind or the ego, is that whatever's going on right now, it's perfect. And it doesn't always feel that way, but it's perfect for our evolution and for what it's triggering in us to release the old baggage that we can't really carry into the new that we're creating. And for me, I think just to have that perspective of it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong. that's happening. There's unresolved stuff in me that's being triggered to be released so that I can go into this new phase. And I've been needing to remind myself of that, several times a day recently. But it is an awareness that gets me through some of these moments.
Mhm.
And, we've got a lot of our physical tools that we've shared. And, both Jenny and Lori have so many of them, we all do. But, just grounding into the earth at a time like this and breathing, some of those really basic biohacking tools, that bring us back to ourselves. And I'll just maybe conclude this little piece, turn it over to Lori, with a little reminder that is kind of counterintuitive sometimes. Is that when we have so much going on and we're upset and overwhelmed, sometimes the best thing to do is nothing.
Mm.
And again, spinning our wheels and being in action feels more satisfying to part of us. But when we're in that state and we're stressed out and, we've got all this cortisol going on, it's hard to think clearly.
Mhm.
And I mean, I did this earlier today, like I took a half hour to do my process of getting quiet and centered because that's when the guidance comes in of what to do and how to handle things from a place of, wisdom and alignment that in, chasing my tail, I probably wouldn't think of. So that's a few of the things that I can offer as a perspective and a couple of tools as we kick off this, I think, very important conversation.
Absolutely. And you mentioned reframing. So I literally just moved 5 days ago. 5 days ago. It was like one thing after another. The movers showed up 3 hours late. We didn't get to my new home until 7 o'clock at night to do the unloading. It was
Oh,
raining. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. And then we found out that the house had not been cleaned. And I had actually hired someone to come in and clean the old place after the movers left. So I'm like, okay, I'm being responsible. You think everybody's
you
responsible.
have good cleaning karma.
Anyway, so kind of a little aside to this is that Monday was the 45th anniversary of my mother's funeral.
Oh,
And why does that tie into this? Well, on my mom's deathbed, she told my sister and my dad and I each some really poignant things that she wouldn't have said at any other time. And my mom like lived to clean a house. You could eat off the floors in the home I grew up in. That's how clean it was, right? So when she said this to me, I almost fell off my chair. She said, "Lori, you need to get a cleaning lady." Like, what? And she said, "You're a businesswoman and you're getting married, and your husband's going to expect you to entertain his clients. The last thing you have time to do is clean a house." And I got to tell you, over the years, because I was only 23 when she was telling me this, over the years, even if I was just scraping by, like I had to have a cleaning lady because I would just cry if I had to clean because I had promised my mom that I would have a cleaning lady. I know that sounds like crazy. Anyway, so I move into this house that's so filthy, and my friend Debbie helped clean the kitchen on Saturday. It took us 6 hours just to clean the cupboards. They were so caked with grease. I mean, it was like, okay. So finally, I called the realtor and I said, the bathrooms, I can't even go in there. I mean, it was worse than what you'd see at a gas station, a bad gas station. So she hired a cleaning lady and then she rethought it when I sent her the pictures and went and hired a deep cleaning crew. Well, the deep cleaning crew was two gals who were, you know, around my age, who were a hoot and a half, who are just, I really just clicked with, and we were, getting along. We decided we're going to go to happy hour at one of the local places here next week, and one of them wants to fix me up with a guy she knows, and so we all kind of went, isn't it a good thing that the house was dirty? Because we wouldn't have met otherwise. So, I mean, really,
There's a divine plan sometimes that's really hard to see in the moment.
absolutely, absolutely. Because honestly, I mean, part of moving to this area was I did want to meet some new people and I did want to expand my horizons. And who thought it would because of a dirty house?
Mm-hmm. Lori, so this is, you were experiencing that kind of in this 3D in the physical, but I want to touch on kind of what you're expressing is transition in this kind of sacred way that can be really messy. Transition can be really emotional. It's full of unknowns. It's, this space where we like who we are no longer fits and what we're becoming who that hasn't fully arrived yet. So it's kind of this threshold, right, between this old and this new. And it's kind of this detour as well. So Susan and I were talking the other day, and Susan, you said something that really stuck with me. And I think that this is really kind of pertinent to what you're talking about, Lori, as well, is, there is this kind of divine plan. And if we show up in the way that we have kind of committed to showing up, right? Like you're moving into this space and you're doing all the necessary steps to make all of this happen, and you meet these two women, and like you said, like that wouldn't have happened otherwise, but you were there showing up as you needed to be, and things happen. So there is this plan, right? I definitely feel that, and I have to hold on to that because I am going through a divorce, and it is extremely emotional, and I'm trying to hold the intention of it not being messy. And I have
And
mediation
Jenny,
tomorrow, and it's like a, you know, trying to hold this intention.
Jenny, let me share the story that you were referring to, because what you're talking about is like, I really want to believe that there's a divine plan,
Hmm.
because that would make me feel so much more comfortable that, things are being worked out. I had an experience just a few days ago of that was so loud to me that I do want to share it. And it's in kind of the realm of quantum science that used to be called woo-woo, but we know about entanglement and all of that. I had heard a message a number of years ago that it's all other things being equal. It's important for us to keep our plans and not change them at the last minute, because the universe, our spirit guides, the divine, however you want to think about it, kind of is expecting you to be there. So if they're lining up somebody for you to meet, they're expecting, like, your situation with the cleaners,
Right.
that didn't seem random at all. So I know that always stuck in my mind, that all other things being equal, you kind of want to stay on the trajectory that you committed to. And I had an experience a couple of days ago where I made a plan with someone that I later thought, gee, that didn't make much sense. It wasn't on anybody's way and the wrong time of day. And I thought about suggesting changing it. But I was remembering this little message about the value of keeping the plans. So I did. And it was one of those things. It was a hot day and I couldn't get parking and I had to park a few blocks away. And I knew that by the time I walked back in the heat, there would be a spot, and there was all that. So we were there for a while and then we left. And I was walking back to my car. And as we crossed the street, another good friend of mine drove by and said, Susan. And she said, are you going to that restaurant where I was parked? Because it's our favorite. And I was like, no, I'm coming from this one, but I'm parked there. We'll stop and say hello. So we said hello in the parking lot, and we were wearing the identical colors. And we don't have the same coloring, so we never do. So the point of the story to me was it was a very loud validation about this principle of keeping the plans, because although that little synchronicity meeting wasn't really meaningful in my life, didn't provide any, opportunity that I'm aware of, other than to validate this point, especially with the matching colors, because that just took it over the top. But it left me with, so Jenny, this is the reassurance I can offer to all of us. The plan is that specific it was split second timing of crossing that street. And I had changed my clothes into that outfit. So the impulses, when we are paying attention and we are being guided, even if it's small, about go here and not there, or show, the things that happen for many of us are so, it's verifiable in our experience. And I know that there are other divine appointments being set up for me, both personally and professionally. So what I'm going to leave off with is I'm being very intentional about my plans these days because I don't want to change things. So I'm being a little less casual about the commitments I make because they're putting our intentions out into the world to entangle positively with others. And anyway, that's my 2 cents on that one. But
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, there were moments this weekend where I just wanted to go and move someplace else. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. You just paid, $3,000 to move from point A to point B. Now you're going to go hire somebody to move you to, I mean, like it wasn't even possible. But
not an option.
That's how like frustrating it had gotten. And then I'm like, okay, you're going to have to reframe this and you're just going to have to breathe through it. And by about 6 o'clock last night, I had gone up to the kitchen to get a glass of hydrogen water, and I'm walking back down to my office, and I went, "This is really a beautiful home," because it was the first time that it was like clean and the lighting was nice, and I'm like, "This is a beautiful home, and it's going to be wonderful living here." And once it's all put into place, I'm going to really enjoy it, really and truly. So, but to get to that, I mean, I think back. Okay, so astrologically, there's something going on, and I'm not an astrologer, so you're going to have to go check with your astrological people for the details on this. But what we're experiencing right now is similar to what we experienced 40 years ago. And that would be 1996. So if you think
1996 was 29 years ago.
Oh.
40 years ago would have been 85.
I'm sorry, 29 years. Okay. Sorry, I got the number wrong. I've not been getting enough sleep in the midst of all this either. But nonetheless, 1996, what was going on? And for me, it was a dark night of the soul. And so I just went, well, thank God in the last 29 years, thank you, Susan, I have really learned so much. I've done so much personal growth work. I've got so many tools in my toolbox, and I know how to navigate things in a way that I didn't know back then. So even though I see the intensity of the energies, not just in myself, but in everyone around me, I keep counting my blessings and saying how grateful I am that I have these tools, that I've done this work, because yeah, it might be a little bumpy, but a little bumpy is way better than a dark night of the soul.
I call that, it's times like this that we got to put on our big girl pants, and they fit really well.
Right.
I also think it's important to recognize, the process, like you were saying, of discovering yourself and these tools and that. And, we look at, and I mentioned before about how we celebrate typically this month around weddings and graduation and, transitions that we seem excited about, happy about, but there's also, I think it's also important to recognize where we came from in that space. And Lori, and I'll mention this as well, because initially when you first told us that you were moving a couple months ago now, that you were going to be moving, and how sad that made you feel, because you had built this like beautiful space, and you had kind of really felt at home, and it was a disruption,
Right.
It was this huge transition. And I think that it's really important to recognize that aspect of transitions, and really kind of celebrating the grief aspect and really digging into that as well. And I guess trusting, that that even though things can be like collapsing or seem confusing, that these aren't signs of weakness. And I think that as a society, we tend to go there and we tend to kind of isolate ourselves with these emotions because we are kind of taught that grief is like something negative that no one really wants to see or deal with. And that's, you're feeling too deeply or something like this, right? So, I think that it can be such a beautiful thing to really kind of dig into that feeling a little bit and understand that that dark side is not wrong, but necessary. And I saw a little quote earlier and it said, the cocoon looks like destruction to the caterpillar, but it's transformation and progress. And I thought that that was really beautiful and that people might kind of sense a ring of truth in that as well.
Absolutely, Jenny. And when I think about grief, my goodness, I I got married the week my mother died. Funeral was Monday, got married on Saturday. And I did not feel like I had a right to be sad because I was getting married. I had fabulous in-laws. I was marrying into this great big family. I was going to, the Virgin Islands and my honeymoon, blah, 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 blah. And so I've stuffed it. And about 9 months later, it started to bubble up. And my now ex looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you? That was 9 months ago." And I'm like, whoa, okay. So I stuffed it again. And it wasn't until 15 years later, I was in a store in Texas and I saw this book called Motherless Daughters. And I went, wow, what is this? And I picked it up and I read one paragraph and I'm like, why does this author know me better than I know myself?
Mm.
And right then, my friend that I was with came up to me and looked at the book and looked at me, took cash out of his pocket, threw it at the cashier, got me into the car, and I sobbed for an hour and a half because finally all of this suppressed grief just bubbled to the surface. My point in sharing this transition that got stuffed is that in the ensuing months, if not years, couple of years, the grief was as real as if it had happened yesterday. But my family and friends were like, what is wrong with you? That was 15 years ago. So not only was I being asked not to grieve, but actually being shamed for it. It was very, very, very frustrating. So I think that whenever someone's grieving, whatever their process is, whatever their time frame is, has to be honored.
Mm-hmm.
Lori, I would generalize that to whatever is true for us
Yeah.
needs to be honored.
Mhm.
And I would actually take that to another level, to what I'm personally exploring and feeling receiving guidance about. We avoid a lot of those feelings that are the difficult ones that are painful because on some level, I mean, they're triggering things from times in our lives that we couldn't handle them often. And there's some sense that those feelings are bigger than us and that we can't handle them because to our wounded child and a lot of our aspects, they are bigger. And one of the things I'm being reminded of and reminding myself of and reminding all of us of is who we really are is bigger than any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that if we're conscious enough to be having this conversation and to be listening to it, so including everybody in the audience, then we're at a point to be able to appreciate if there's something coming up that is unpleasant, it's because it's time for me to let it go so that I can move forward into this positive transition without the baggage from the past and to resist the temptation to stuff it again. So, like, all right, let's just finally deal with this because in the light of day, the boogeyman really isn't that big. And that's, I'm getting, it's 97 degrees out here today. I'm getting chills when I say that, because I feel like I'm finally doing that these days. And there's stuff I have been avoiding for a long time. And the energy of avoidance cost me a lot. And it turned out that in the light of day, it wasn't that big a deal, or that who I am now can handle it in a way that I couldn't before. And again, I'm guessing that may be true for a lot of people listening, that
Well,
they
it's hard to
may be
see.
ready
Mm-hmm.
to deal with and let go of things that they couldn't before, because the whole planet is evolving, whether we're, aware of that on a left brain basis or not. And the frequencies that are available to us for healing and forgiveness are way greater than they ever were before for everyone.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, and I think you might have mentioned this earlier, it's when you're in the tunnel, it's hard to see that you're in the tunnel sometimes, like in that cocoon, it's
Yep.
hard to know that this breaking down is actually going to transition into a butterfly. And I think
Right.
it is good, because we have these ego stories, right? Our conditioning that we hold on to. So I think it's important. And I think, for our audience, I think maybe we can kind of start to talk about these kind of practical ways to hold ourselves in transition. And I think that might start with questions of, especially things that I'm asking myself right now, navigating this divorce and with my children and in this new place, you know, who am I really without a title or the relationship or the place and the plan? Where is my truth, and where is that next level of that? And so I think, you know, we need to celebrate ourselves, right, in being able to navigate these transitions, because each time you recognize a deeper part of yourself. Every time, it's impossible not to be able to look back and be like, wow, like I can't believe I was there, or something, just, oh, I'll never do that again, or and be grateful that you had that experience. But I think for our audience, it's important for us to have this conversation and to remember, you, Susan, you mentioned earlier about the breath, and making sure that you're nourishing these aspects of yourself and resting, and kind of lean into the softness of yourself. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about how can we hold this space for people and what that looks like.
Well, you're referring to self-care, which is, sometimes when we're busy and moving and all of that, it's the first thing to go. It should be the last thing to go. So I was saying earlier, sometimes the best thing to do is nothing, even if it's just a few minutes of getting centered before jumping into activity. And that's a hard habit to break.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say self-care in general. And we were talking earlier about the breath and about, connecting to nature. Those are some really basic things.
And if you're moving, make sure you have a chiropractor appointment.
Massages, all the really good things to help relieve that tension, for sure. But I
Yes, I
think
got
that's
my
important.
Epsom salts are, like going to be one of the first things that move, for the bath.
Right, exactly.
But in a practical sense, um, Jenny, like we have other tools. I'm going to mention another one that I find to be invaluable all the time, but especially at times like this. And it's a bit of a lesson. I think we've mentioned it before about approaching life from the perspective that there's no problems, there's just choices to make and things to do.
Mm.
And that, when I'm able to practice that, really takes me out of the yuck and back into that empowered place of, yeah, ultimately there's choices to make and things to do in all situations. Um, I have found that to be an invaluable tool for navigating life. Probably my top one in the past few years that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Lori, do
good
you
thing.
have any? Lori, you've got some suggestions, I'm sure.
Oh my goodness. Well, chiropractor, massage, yes, that stuff for to take care of the physical body. And I'll be honest, I've been running Heelys nonstop. I've got three of them. Boom,
Yep.
boom, boom.
Yep.
I'm running the emotional field on myself. I'm running the emotional field on Gabby. I'm running the physical stuff on myself. I mean, one's attached to me, one's just going into the information field. Um, I I swear by these devices, and there's a reason for it because they work. They absolutely work. And when you have the ability to take a highly charged situation, and Gabby is 9, and she was just terrified during this move. I mean, she grew up in a first 2 years in a chicken coop on an Amish breeding farm. So
Hmm.
when she came to live with me, there was a lot of emotional rehab work that I did with her. Um, and she finally is, very well balanced, but she doesn't like, because this is like her safe haven, right? Because I always say she went from puppy hell to puppy heaven. And so her puppy heaven was being taken apart. And even though she knew some of the people that were helping us pack and whatever, it was very unsettling to her. And to the point where she ended up having diarrhea, to trembling, to whining, and just even today she's still off. It's getting better every day, but to know that I have a device that I can pull up and see what her deep underlying emotional themes are, and then I can send frequencies to, it's like gentle rain on that emotional field. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been, and of course, no surprise, run back flowers on her and run back flowers on me, and they're pretty similar what comes up in the top 5. So that to me has been a big, big, big one. And the other thing is, pack it. I'm just going to speak about the moving part. When I'm making a big transition like this, what I do is I pack a suitcase and I put all my toiletries, all my supplements, all the things that I would need if I were going to be in a hotel for 5 days into a suitcase. Because that way I don't have to go, oh, what box is all that in? That takes that out of the equation, because when you're looking at a sea of boxes and you're like, oh, I'll remember I put it in X, Y, or Z box. You're not gonna. I'm sorry.
Very thank you, because I'm packing, and that is a really great tip. I really appreciate that. I will thank you later.
You will. I'm not kidding. It's a saving grace. So, um, even at that, I was telling the ladies off screen that I couldn't find my hair treatment stuff today. But you make do, and you just don't sweat the small stuff. That would probably be the best one. Don't sweat the small stuff. And guess what? It's all
Small
small
stuff.
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 And
So,
remember, this is the matrix. This is just it's just an illusion anyway.
and we get to choose. That's right, Lori. And I think that this is really important and for our audience to, lean into community, lean into spaces here like we have, and talk to people. It's sometimes it's good to just be still, like Susan mentioned, but sometimes it's there's a different side to that, and isolation can be really can negatively impact our nervous system sometimes. So I think leaning into community is a big one for me.
Jenny, we need to remind each other of these things. There are
Mhm.
days I need to be reminded of all of this.
Yeah.
Every day.
When we're being triggered, so that community in all ways.
Yeah.
We're not alone, and women are really good at supporting each other through these things.
Well, ladies, I think that we had a wonderful discussion here today, and I know there's a lot of you out there who are navigating some intense transitions. And speaking of weddings and graduations and stuff. As a mom, I cannot even imagine what that must be like to watch your child kind of grow up and go off. That has to be a whole grief in itself and transition. You know, it makes me emotional even just thinking about what someone must experience with that. So I think, you know, it's important to not rush to rebuild and honor the space that we have kind of in between our stories. And it might seem like a hard chapter, but it can also be an initiation story, or writing the first words of the next book sometimes. And just to remind ourselves that we're not breaking down, but we're breaking open. So,
And as always, Jenny, we'd love to hear. I mean, people are going through transitions, to please share what's going on with you and how what we've talked about today might have been impactful or helpful, or other tools to
Absolutely.
contribute. You know, humanity is going through a big transition. And those of us that are doing it with, you know, our eyes open, it's been interesting to navigate.
Yeah. And so to our audience, you know, reach out and post your stories in the Facebook group. And, you know, if there's things that maybe you want a biohack for, let us know and we'll respond accordingly. We really want to develop a sense of community with all of you. You know, we love getting together and talking because we're friends and like-minded souls and soul sisters and all that good stuff. But we want to get to know you better. So reach out, let us know what your needs are, what your problems are, what your issues are, what you want to learn more about.
yeah, if you're listening, you're here already, which means that, you know, you love it. You found your tribe, so bring it on in. And
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
more
Thank
to
you
come.
so much. And we'll see you again next time, everyone, on Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed.
Bye for now.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, where we empower women to take control of the two most important areas of their life, their health and their wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another amazing woman who's ready to elevate her wealth and wellness journey. Stay connected with us by heading to our website and joining our Facebook community. All the details can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep thriving and unleashing your highest potential.